The case of the murder of Sandra Birchmore. This is one every single time I look at it, and I've been looking at it a lot this last week. I just get more and more angry because this is such a situation where this young girl was failed so many times by people that should have been there to help her through a very rough time. After losing her parents, she's joining the Police Explorer program. And what happens there? Not good guidance, not anything to help her heal or to help her kind of move her mind in a positive way. No, she's preyed upon, allegedly, by officer Matthew Farwell and allegedly a couple others as well. Joining me to discuss, Jennifer Coffindaffer, retired FBI special agent. It's about a week into this case now that we know publicly. What's been your reactions to how this has been developing?
Well, Tony, this case really, it's been one I've been following for months now.
Mm-hmm.
It never made any sense.
Mm-mm.
And I'll tell you what didn't make sense was when they publicly released the video of him going into her apartment right before she was last seen
Mm-hmm.
ever, and then leaves and he's all masked up. I mean, he looks like a perpetrator
Yeah.
and kind of sneaking in and then sneaking out. I think it was like 25, 30 minutes he was there. That never sat well.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, all the allegations started coming out about his relationship with her, blah, 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 blah. I thought, how in the world could this possibly be a suicide? It didn't make any sense, especially when we learned that she was hanging from a ligature from a doorknob. Not a usual way
No.
that a young girl who's pregnant is going to kill herself. And then now, of course, the full reveal on, all this information that law enforcement had clear back then.
Mm-hmm.
All these text messages, the broken necklace, the bruising on her body, the autopsy details regarding her hyoid bone, uh, the relationship they had, Tony, just awful.
How did this happen in terms of this not being investigated as a homicide? I mean, walk me through what you think went on behind the scenes once she's dead, once Farwell goes in there and allegedly murders her. How does this not get an investigation? How does the medical examiner say, yep, suicide? How does nobody look into this further? I mean, who has that kind of allegiance to Matthew Farwell that they're going to be like, yeah, clearly this was a murder, but hey, buddy, we got you. I got your back.
Well, I think the biggest problem is that Emmy report,
Hmm.
the Emmy saying that it was a suicide. That is just a recipe for disaster when you're an investigator. We saw it, and I know we'll probably get into it more in the Karen Reed case, where that Emmy basically doesn't make any conclusion.
Yeah.
That's also an issue. Anytime you don't have a conclusion by the Emmy that isn't a homicide and you're an investigator and you have all of these clues that show you it's a homicide, but you've got a medical examiner that says it isn't, how in the world do you think that wouldn't produce reasonable doubt in a trial? And
So
so you can't take it from there.
no. So what did Matthew Farwell in a real sick way really just luck out and had a real incompetent medical examiner who just is like, "Yep, it's suicide," or do you think there was some sort of collusion here or some sort of influence? Like, let's make this a suicide.
Well, that's the $1,000,000 question, and the believe me, the bureau's going to get to the bottom of it, and they have a really good I think, some carrots to dangle in front of Farwell. I mean, first of all, if anybody else colluded with him on this cover up, and I didn't like seeing those police reports when they were calling him Matt.
Hmm.
Never seen a police report in the ever working, local crimes, working with the gang unit. All the police reports I've read, which are tens of thousands, I have never seen somebody write, "Oh, and Matt didn't do it," basically.
Yeah.
You know, uh, so I couldn't believe that, Tony. So that in and of itself gave me a lot of pause just in terms of the familiarity. But then you see Fanning, the one who wrote it, and one that does have a loose connection to the case with Karen Reed,
Hmm.
you see that he was invited to be on the arrest team. You see him leaving the courthouse. You
Hmm.
see him part of that, part of the investigation. And the Bureau and the U.S. Attorney's Office not only included the state police, Massachusetts State Police, and the Stoughton Police Department, but thanked them,
Yeah.
very strongly for all their cooperation and help. So I found all of that sort of juxtaposed to the idea that this was a gigantic cover up. Again, are we talking about complete incompetence?
It can masquerade as conspiracy quite often. It's just we're seeing a real pattern over here in this area of the country in these two departments that are right next to each other, sharing some people and such. It just seems far too ridiculous to say that everybody is that incompetent. And with him being on the arrest team and being the one who initially wrote the report, is this trying? I mean, we can look at it another way too. Is this trying to kind of dust away some stuff early on, so it doesn't look like there was some sort of a cover up? Like, look, he's here. He's part of the arrest team now. If he was part of this, he wouldn't be on the arrest team. Let's just get him over here so he looks a lot more noble than criminal.
Well, I could tell you this, the FBI, who would have been in charge of putting together the ops plan and the orders
Hmm.
and getting everything together, they do not pick the personnel from the other departments.
Hmm.
They tell the other departments, listen, we'd like to have two agents, or two officers,
Yeah.
two detectives, two this, two that. And then those are offered up by those department heads typically.
Hmm.
So could to your point, I'm just saying, because it wouldn't have been federally selected,
Yeah.
is that a possibility? It's a possibility. What really bothers me about this whole thing is the detectives from the state police, because remember, the Canton Police Department, this happened in Canton.
Mhm.
That's where her apartment was. So, of course, they were the ones on the wellness check. But com- immediately, typically, when you have a situation like this, it's turned over in Massachusetts anyway to the state police for investigation. But I will say this, it was just assumed to be a suicide. This is back to this incompetence.
Hmm.
She had wash in the washing machine. You know, she was drying clothes. All they had to do was look at her phone for 5 minutes to see all the appointments she was making, to see the gender reveal for her child she was scheduling, to see all these communications with Farwell, that he was the last one she communicated with. Hey, I'm coming over. Okay, I'll leave the door unlocked.
Hmm.
It's really stunning.
Yeah, I mean, it blows your mind. What do we know about the other allegations about William Farwell and Richard Devine as well? I know they have not been arrested, they've not been charged. I know they've stepped down from their positions. But there are allegations that are floating out there that there was some involvement there with them with Sandra.
Yes, there are allegations that they were involved with sexual trysts, essentially, with her.
Hmm.
Just this whole idea that she was somehow being passed around to his twin and his buddy is sickening. Do I think that that could have happened? Yes. I mean, just the fact that they stepped down and so forth, they're being looked at. But the question is it criminal? If obviously if she was 15 and this occurred, that's statutory rape for
Yeah.
both of those characters. But was she having consensual sex with them at the age of consent?
Hmm.
That's the first question they've got to answer. And then second, to me, did they have any part of this cover up? Because remember, it's pretty much helps them out too,
Yeah.
right? I mean, for her not to be here.
Hmm.
I find that all very, very suspect, and I just hope, and I know the bureau will. They are going to get the bottom. There will be no rock not unturned in this case.
I know it's still an ongoing investigation, and I know they did state that in the press conference last week that there could possibly be more arrests because this is not done. I guess if we already have one down. We have Matthew arrested and charged. Why not the other two yet? Is there just not the evidence there yet? Do they have to keep digging more to find? I mean, it's quite an allegation to make out there without there being a lot of beef to it.
Well, there's a lot more to find, and remember, they, to me, stretch this statute to its fullest degree,
Hmm.
which is, murder of a victim witness. Right?
Hmm.
Normally, you find this in mafioso type cases where you uh, try somebody or you charge somebody federally when they've killed one of your witnesses.
Hmm.
This wasn't exactly that, right? This was saying that she was molested at the age of 15, which is a federal crime, and he killed the witness and the victim,
Hmm.
right, to cover up the crime. So they stretched this really to the nth degree. But Tony, what I think should happen, and I can't imagine it won't. I just can't imagine the Commonwealth isn't going to come back and charge Farwell with 2 counts
Hmm.
of first degree murder for
Yeah.
her baby and for Sandra Birchmore. I think that would, at least in some part, help alleviate all the ill will
Hmm.
against this DA's department and the police departments that are involved.
There's a lot that needs to be corrected out there. I mean, what's your take on? I mean, just looking at some of the internals of this, of how this went down when the person that's named as person number two, which is a friend of Birchmore, who called the police saying, "Hey, I'm concerned. You have an officer over there. These are the allegations, or what I've witnessed from my friend. I think you should investigate this. Look at this." It didn't go to HR. It didn't go to a commander. It didn't go to chief or somebody who would be above this to start looking in on it. And that's person number five is the dispatcher who got that information. They took it directly to Farwell. This is this just how they operate of like, let's go directly to the proposed perpetrator and see what they have to say first?
Well, when looking at cases like this, Tony, I will say there are complaints that are so unfounded and bogus against police officers that filter into departments daily.
Sure.
It's really unbelievable, and but nevertheless, when you have a complaint like this, you have to investigate it, and the last person that should be notified is the person that is the subject of the allegation. It's when you see something like this happen in a department and at least as an FBI agent, you just don't see anything like this within the bureau realm.
Hmm.
And then working 15 years detached to other police departments, never saw anything corrupt like this,
Hmm.
but it's out there. And I know that from working public corruption for years,
Yeah.
right? When you're on the when I haven't been a part of anything, of seeing anything like that firsthand, only investigating it after or while it's occurring secondhand, if you will, or not secondhand, but in that a different capacity. And so if you're asking me if I'm surprised, no,
Hmm.
heck no. Unfortunately, small little departments like this. Listen, Tony, most of these officers, and I haven't done the background of everybody that's a Stoughton police officer back in this time,
Hmm.
most of them are straight out of high school.
Yeah.
Like they were buddies on the football team. They all know each other, is or teeny towns and little towns that all surround each other, and they get almost no training. They go through a small police academy, and that's it. The training stops there.
Yeah.
The FBI has a program called the Law Enforcement Training for Street Survival that they started and that has huge amount of funding where FBI agents go out and train local officers
Hmm.
on how to conduct investigations just like this,
Hmm.
whether it's homicide, how to tell the difference, how to conduct yourself in terms of shoot, don't shoot situations. That's the primary thing they do, but they branch off into investigations as well. My whole point is that they're totally untrained,
Yeah.
and I would say that the public, unfortunately, often doesn't have police officers that have any experience that are conducting these types of investigations.
Yeah. And we're sitting here hoping. for the best, and we think that, oh yes, they know what they're doing, they're going to handle this correctly. And person number 5 here, the dispatcher who informed Farwell of the allegation, was that person corrupt or was that person just ignorant? I guess is the question, which I could see it being very just ignorant. Like you were saying, these people were, likely even to high school together. They're on the football team. They're in the same small town. So they're still doing the same small town stuff into adulthood. And who knows, the dispatcher could have been, Jeannie, who they had the class in English with a couple years ago. I want to let you know, Matt, there's so many ways where I could see this being just utter ignorance and the way that, and then it enables people like this to be able to get away with things undetected because they have such power without many checks going on.
Yeah, you said it perfectly. And for anyone who wants to see an insight into it, in trial, we saw this happen with Detective Proctor in a sense.
Yeah.
He started texting all his high school buddies, you know, details and things he should have never been texting about the case, and saying, horrible things in these text messages. And that's the sort of kind of relationships I think that go on with these small town departments and their buddies.
Yeah.
And it's the same type of deal. I can just see, this dispatcher saying, "Oh gosh, got another huckleberry here." Now
Hmm.
they're saying you had some affair with an explorer,
Yeah. Yeah.
and laughing it off, and him laughing it off. But that's where things have to quit and or have to change. And I think, Tony, it's really hiring outside police chiefs in these departments, and with the money they're making, they actually make. I looked into this. I thought, well, they probably just weren't very well paid. They're pretty well paid.
Yeah.
And I just can't imagine that they can't get people with college degrees, with people who have more in their game
Yeah.
than just being a buddy on the force.
I mean, that's really what it feels like in some of these towns. It feels like all the jocks went and became police officers. And if you didn't go to college, you didn't go to anything else. We took this training. We're going to stay here. We're going to work here. We're going to make this money. And suddenly we have all this power. And we have, opinions on people. We have vendettas to settle. We have all these things to do around town. And now there's suddenly the power. When it goes unchecked, I guess the bar for what's acceptable just keeps being pushed back and back and back because they realize, I can get away with this, I can get away with that, I'll get away with this, and it goes on. I mean, literally for years, but it's a decade in this situation with nobody being the wiser. Is that just because there's just so much trust there, and everybody's kind of covering for everybody? And does it that nobody wants to think the worst in each other, that everybody kind of bends the rules a little bit, but nobody's would go that far. I mean, do you think they were shocked by this when this arrest came down, when the feds went in and finally arrested him? Do you think the police department was surprised by the gravity of what this guy was up to?
I certainly hope that they were surprised, and I also want to make a couple of comments here. First of all, Farwell is far behind your average, just Mayberry
Hmm.
RFD jock or whatever out of high school. And again, I don't know all of his background. I do know he was in the military. I do know he served on another police force before he joined Stoughton. So he was actually probably more trained and more qualified than most candidates that the Stoughton Police Department. So I do want to caveat it with that.
Yeah.
I know he actually had a pretty strong background. But what Farwell had that I don't think most any of these officers have is a complete depravity,
Yeah.
a absolute sick monster that now has a badge. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what we're seeing. He hasn't been convicted, but that's what we're seeing is a sick monster. And I think that is very rare to have a monster like that, in a
Yeah.
position that he was in. So I wanted to make that point. And
Yeah.
secondarily, I don't think we can ever broad brush. There is no brush strokes right now that we know of that fade over into the Karen Reed case.
Hmm.
There just aren't.
Sure.
There's just, we don't have anything like that, no facts like that. But I wonder how far up the chain this could go. And I want to know what they find on this ME. Are
Hmm.
we gonna hear just ignorance,
Yeah.
or are we gonna hear of a bad guy that
Yeah.
had some sort of relation.
Well, and then you got to look at it too. If that ME, if they're ignorant, well, then that plays to their advantage if they're just an idiot. But if there is some sort of collusion here, I think they're going to have to start looking back at every single ruling that that ME has done in their career and go, is this accurate or is it not? Because if they're going to do it for one, you got to assume it may not be their first rodeo.
Absolutely. And the other thing is with Farwell, they need to look at all his interaction with other
Yes.
females that he's had cases against. Can you imagine, if he was investigating rape cases, if he was investigating child molestation cases, child pornography cases, all of these sorts of cases that he could have had his hand in, and did he manipulate or otherwise, hurt those investigations? They
Yeah.
need to go back and look at everything with Farwell and all these decisions that were made, Tony. It's
Yeah.
it's sickening. I know it has to really be sickening to somebody, like you
Oh my
and all
God.
the members of your audience that
Yeah.
follow true crime that are just thinking now anything's possible because this happened.
I have a 12-year-old daughter, and I cannot imagine. I mean, it's like these are the fears that I have. When you send them out to go do something, and you're not the one supervising, and you just hope that the people that are out there. And you would think in something like this, it's the Police Explorer program. What's going to happen? But people thought the same thing of sending their kids to Sunday school in Catholic church too. It's these places where these predators can hide undetected amongst a lot of good people. I'm never like everybody's bad, but these are the places that these people hide, and we need to have a better system of vetting, of continuing to vet even after they're in and hired, to make sure that somebody didn't get past check one and now by check three, now we really see their true colors. It's just shocking in this case because it does seem allegedly like there might be some other people involved here. And if you got that circle of that kind of surrounds you and insulates you, it just allows this sort of crap to continue on.
Yeah, and Tony, it would be so simple. What the FBI does, and it works like a charm, whether you believe in it or not, meaning generally speaking, if people believe in it or not, is you polygraph people.
Mhm.
You put them on the box and you ask questions just like that. Have you ever sexually molested anybody? Have you ever, engaged in viewing child pornography? Have you ever committed a felony? These are the questions and agents, if you have clearances, top secret or other major clearances, you have to take a polygraph every 3 years to
Mhm.
make sure you haven't done anything in the interim, right?
Yeah.
And to get hired, you need that. You know how much money that would take? It would take probably about $500
Yeah.
to have a polygrapher who's a retired FBI agent who has no affiliation with the department to come in and give an hour-long exam. And I actually have one on my or a polygrapher that I interviewed and did a on my show on Break the Case with, and he's amazing, and that's what he does.
Yeah.
But they need it in Massachusetts, and they need it bad right now. I think I'd polygraph everybody in my whole department and see what's really going on and weed out the weeds.
I think that's a wonderful idea. How scared do you think some of these departments are of doing that, though? Of what they will uncover?
Oh, well, it doesn't matter because what is important is public safety, is that
Hmm.
the public over there seemingly what I never knew until I started looking at the Karen Reed case. No one has any regard for law enforcement there. They think everyone that is crooked. The person could be the straightest person, and
Yeah.
because they have a badge on, they think they're crooked. So, what better way to instill some sense of
Yeah.
understanding and belief in these people than to conduct some sort of investigation and require polygraph tests, whatever,
Hmm.
every 10 years, every 5 years. But
Yeah.
you got to do it when you onboard somebody. It's a no brainer.
Do you need the leadership though to want to do that and be willing to do that? And I think that's where I think we're running into a lot of issues because sometimes that leadership knows about some things, or in some cases, maybe involved in some things. And they know exactly where those cracks are. And if we take a magnifying glass, we're going to find out how those cracks were made. But it needs to be done regardless. It's yeah, it's just so scary to see a case like this. And there's so many of them. This is just one we heard about. This is one that got caught.
Well, this is going to have far reaching tentacles, I think. And, once the Bureau gets into something, they got into the Karen Reed case, the judge said something near 4,000 pages of investigation. Now, what they found there was a bunch of dirty messages.
Mhm.
That was about it.
Sure.
But what's going to happen on this one? Oh my goodness! I think we're going to see a far-reaching people's heads are going to roll, whether it's criminal or whether it's because of just sheer negligence. Somebody has to pay the piper on this one. We have a dead woman and who was pregnant, two dead souls, and it's just horrible.
Hey, thanks for checking out the video. Be sure to follow us wherever you download podcasts, and especially Apple Podcasts, where you can get advanced episode and premium content on our premium channel right there. Also, be sure to follow us on social media so you don't miss any breaking updates on the stories that matter to you most. We're on TikTok, X, Instagram, Facebook. Just search Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Brueski, and you'll find us right there. Again, thanks for watching.